please. Thank you very much. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Devona. I am one of the social workers here at HBT, and presenting with me as well as Paige Gilson, the other social worker here at HBT. Just to give you a little bit more information about kind of how we work here at HBT, we've changed it new this year. I am the social worker that works with grades 3 through 5. So if your student is in 3rd through 5th grade, you'll be hearing from me, or you are welcome to reach out to me anytime you have questions or you feel like your student may need a little extra support. And then Paige Gilson is the social worker that works with early childhood to 2nd grade. So if you ever have any questions for your EC, kindergarten through 2nd grader, you are welcome to reach out to her directly. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, thank you all for being here. We are here to discuss and just looking at new this school year, we started to implement a curriculum called the Zones of Regulation. So you are all here today to learn a little bit more about what that is, what is the Zones of Regulation, how can you use it at home. Before we jump into more of that information about the zones specifically, we thought it'd be really important to know some of this background information about what is regulation, and how can we support our kids on that front. Okay, give me a second. Perfect. So what is regulation? Regulation is really the ability for our students to adjust, manage, or control something so it works well, right? So when we're looking at regulation in terms of our emotions, how are we able to control, manage our emotions? Most often, some ways that we use to refer to that could be looking at some of the things on the screen there: self-control, self-management, anger management, impulse control, emotional control, things like that. So these terms are all used to describe how their ability to adjust that state of alertness and how they can use these emotions and regulate them in order to manage situations at hand. How can they appropriately react to both positive and those negative, if you will, feelings and emotions within a moment. To learn more about, so now we've talked about regulation, let's talk about what it is to the opposite, dysregulation. That would be looking at that imbalance in our students' emotional state. So something happens that may be unexpected, and it makes it a little more difficult to manage their feelings or react in ways with behavior that may not, I quote, serve us well. We may see this a lot in schools with that dysregulation. We are asking our students to do some of the hardest things, which is learning. You have to be pretty vulnerable in order to learn. So we see a lot of that imbalance. You may see it at home as well when you're working with students on their homework and it's hard for them. A lot of that dysregulation may come into play. Their brains are just overloaded with those stress hormones, which then interferes with their ability to calm or to make some positive or good decisions. That's definitely when we see some behaviors pop up again, some looking at maybe like impulsivity and things like that. So today we're hoping to really look at how can we help kids again to regulate on their own, and how you can help your student to learn some of those skills and strategies for you all to use at home. This is just a little piece of, Mona Delhook, this is a researcher, but just looking at, there's a lot of research that backs helping students with their regulation and self-regulation. A first thing that we need to do, it's really important to help them to co-regulate. So that's us as their school staff, but you all as parents and caregivers, helping them to do that co-regulation, teaching them, just like we may teach in school, math, language arts, things like that. We also need to teach them how to regulate, not just expecting them to, just calm down when you are upset. So there's a lot of research that shows a lot of that co-regulation, specifically when our kids are younger. The infant and toddler age is very beneficial to start teaching those skills. But if your kids are late or, a lot older than that, it's not too late. Still taking a step back and really teaching them how to doing that co-regulation and to teach them how to regulate, especially when they are upset or, again, that dysregulated, as I just defined. A piece that we want to mention too that's important here is a factor that could impact their regulation is really looking at, with some kids, there may be other factors that are impacting that. That could be medical reasons. There may be more specific diagnoses that we need to take a look at, or other therapeutic community supports that need to help them with their regulation journey. So we do just want to mention that today, that sometimes it is out of a student's control to be able to effectively regulate. So we definitely encourage families to, if you're having concerns about their ability to be able to regulate, reaching out to, Paige and I are resources, but connecting with your pediatricians and other social supports within your circles and your networks can be very helpful as well, to see, are there next level supports that your student may need with their regulation journey to effectively regulate at home and then at school as well.
And that kind of leads us into the development with regulation in the part of the brain. We know the prefrontal cortex in our brain has a big job with emotional regulation, as well as impulse control and planning, of course. But when we look at, the development of it, it's not even mature until mid-20s. So, kids' prefrontal cortex is still developing, and it's very difficult to get those strategies under their belt. I know when I work with early childhood, one of the first coping strategies we really learn is belly breaths. And that's because it's one of the first they can pull out of their hat, right? We breathe every day. we naturally breathe. And so utilizing something they naturally already do is helpful because it's familiar. Seeking help is another one that's one of those simple strategies, and it's really adult led. It's highly dependent on, the adults around them and them also modeling how to do those strategies. We know that, in late elementary, early middle, we find that the coping strategies get a little bit more sophisticated or complex, which is great, right? Something that I love to see is like positive self-talk, but that's, something that develops as they continue to grow that prefrontal cortex. And even when they're an adolescent, we find that that's still developing. So they might have the coping skills, but when it comes to those bigger emotions, you're still having that behavior or something happen because it takes over. So it is something to consider when you're working with a child or when you're working with your kiddo at home, is that, like Nicole was kind of saying, sometimes it's like out of their control in that moment that they're trying to regulate, but it's really hard. There is something to be said about just modeling what they could do that makes it a little bit easier on their brain so that they can see it. When we're trying to pull the information and we're already distressed, it's very hard. So oftentimes, when I have a EC kiddo who's crying, I'm modeling what they could do, not just telling them, because they often don't know how to just do that. But they do know how to follow what I'm doing. So mimicking the things I'm doing, and eventually they find, oh, wow, that did help my body. But it is something, to be said about that prefrontal cortex and understanding the brain as it develops. Kind of going back to that neurobiological component too, right, in that brain, there's a couple of things that they say really connects to regulation: sensory processing, executive functioning, emotional regulation, and social cognition. So we're going to go into these 4 domains and kind of look at them and how they relate to regulation. So sensory processing, interoception. We know the senses, right? Smell, taste. Those are the basic ones we always talk about and we take in every day. There are a couple others that they note that I think are important. Vestibular is really about balance and movement, where our balance lives. If we don't have that sensory input, we're often more clumsy. And then when it comes to proprioceptive, that's more of our sixth sense of where our body is. So a really good example of this is being able to close your eyes and touch your nose still. Your nose is there. So it's still connected there, and we understand that. One of the biggest for regulation, though, is the interoception. I think it's really important because this type of sensory is really helping you know what's going on in your body. So you being able to identify the signs when you're hungry, you being able to identify the signs when you need a break. This is one that can be very much interrupted with dysregulation. We're not identifying before we get, we'll talk about like red zone, but we're not identifying before we get too out of control with those emotions. And all of a sudden, it's like a tornado and we need to find a way to calm down. But at the same point, right, we hadn't listened to our body before those signs. So it's getting them to understand even what those signs are. And that is a skill a lot of elementary kiddos are learning, right? What is the signs when I feel angry? What is the signs when I feel sad? Hungry is a little bit easier. Often our stomach rumbles or we see food and we're like, oh yeah, I kind of want that. So it's a little bit more innate and easy on the brain. How we process sensory stimuli is completely different amongst person to person. So it's like, well, that would be fine for me. It might not be fine for that kiddo, right? We have what we call a threshold. So I'll give you a good example. Maybe I'm feeling dysregulated, right? And if I jump on the trampoline for 2 minutes, I'm going to feel regulated again. That I've met my threshold. I feel great again. But for, another person, they might jump on the trampoline for 2 minutes and they didn't hit their threshold. So all of a sudden they have so much energy and they just feel out of control again. So it's knowing what helps their body and what is their threshold. And every person's different. So that's the hard part. So I think it is understanding, again, going back to the interoception, what's going on in my body, what do I need? Heavy work break is something that, we often talk about. It's something like, I'm going to take this stack of papers to the office. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it can be a lot. There's a couple aspects to that, right? The walking movement, getting our body out, and then also the heavy weight of the papers. All of these things that are sending signals to our body can be ways to regulate the body as well. So I think that that's an interesting point because we do utilize that in the school setting a lot. Filtering sensory input. This is again, like how we take in all these sensors around us. So imagine, at our home, we might only have a couple of people that live there, right? But in a classroom full of 20 something kids, there's a lot of stimuli going on. You could have somebody sharpening their pencil while another person has just dropped their pencil on the floor. And then your friend's talking to you and the teacher's trying to do a lesson. And that's a lot to take in. And it can be very difficult to take in all of that stimuli. It's a skill for us to be able to focus on the stimuli we need to and be able to kind of tune out the rest of it. That's not a skill every kiddo has. And it's a skill that is something some kiddos are learning, right? Is very hard. Someone chewing gum could be something so simple to me, but to maybe Nicole, that's something that's like, oh my gosh, I hear that and it's like 10 times louder than it needs to be. So I think that is just another point to understanding that sensory piece to regulation. Go on to the next one.
So for something that I want to note too, for that interoception that Paige was talking about, at least for the older kids, a strategy that I would recommend for parents at home, something we do quite often here at school when I work with students, is going that next level of what are your body cues, we call them. What are your body cues when you are getting upset? So I think that would be helpful for parents when talking to their kids, specifically maybe about peer conflicts at home. If your kiddo is the one who's getting frustrated or maybe having the hard time with that regulation with others, talking to them about what is your body doing before you get to that behavior or maybe the inappropriate behavior piece. Oh, well, I'm noticing, Mom, that my hands are clenching, my fists are clenching, my jaw is clenching, my stomach is hurting, my face is getting hot. These are all things that I try to work with students that they don't notice their bodies are giving them cues before sometimes their brains even realize that they are upset and that it may result in an impulsive action. So that's a little bit more, I think, advanced than with the olders versus working with the youngers. And even that is still very hard. But having those conversations with students at home about what happens in your body when you are getting upset, or you get, for example, maybe not just upset, when you are feeling anxious and you get this test in front of you. What is your body feeling? Those can be cues to our brains of, oh, okay, then it's time for me to use a strategy. If my stomach is hurting, my jaw is clenching, and my face is really hot when I get this test, I know, okay, I need to pause on the test, get a sip of water, take a deep breath, which is another very good, easy always accessible strategy that Paige had talked about before for all of us. And so having those conversations again with kids at home and practicing those strategies is something that's going to be very helpful then for them to use in the moment. When looking at, again, the peer conflict thing, their fists are getting clenched, if it's that conflict, that again cues to that's their body cueing them. I'm upset. I need to walk away from this student or the situation. I need to go tell an adult before I respond with some retaliation moves or whatever it may be. Those are some good strategies and conversations to be having at home with students, and not just all of these strategies that we're talking about today. I want to know it's not just a one time, okay, well, we did it, I would expect them to do it now. No, it's constant. Just like your kid, if your kids are involved in sports, they're going to practice multiple times a week to prep for the games. We need to do the same thing here when we're thinking about our coping strategies. We need to keep practicing them so that when it comes time for the game, whenever the situation, the dysregulating situation is, we are ready, we've practiced, and our brains already remember how to use the strategies. It's not our first time using them, if that makes sense.
And I just wanted to jump in really quick, Nicole, and kind of note for those younger kiddos, something we really start with, especially in early childhood, is just being able to demonstrate what that looks like. So we do activities like walk through the mood, right? So we're walking like we're angry, we're walking like we're sad, and it's just to get the body used to showing that emotion, because oftentimes there is truth in that body movement. So we don't really make up how our angry face looks. A lot of kids have a natural angry face, and they're able to take that out when I say, show me what it looks like when you're really angry. And they do get this angry face on, and they're noticing in their body what it's feeling like. So that's kind of like the basic level to start at, especially with those younger kids. But then even when you get into like kindergarten, first grade, it's telling me what makes you feel angry, and then processing that situation, because often, even when we're processing something that's angry, because it's such a heightened emotion, we do start to feel a little angry about it again. So then we can really work through what is that feeling like in our body. But yeah, I definitely think, Nicole, that was a great point on like the olders and where you go with that. And even the youngers, right? It starts with that basic understanding. What does it even look like when I'm angry? Or what does it look like when I'm feeling silly? It seems like a simple thing, but for them, it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on to then the next piece of these, again, we had talked about the few pieces of like the neurobiological and what contributes to regulation. Another piece of that is the executive functioning for kids. I think we talk a lot and we kind of have some ideas of what executive functioning is, those cognitive processes within our minds of how do we control our thoughts or our actions and help us to accomplish goals, as it's saying there. Thinking more about those, I look at those critical thinking skills for kids, their organization skills, things like that. There has, on the slide here, we list executive functioning, like other skills, that inner speech, flexible thinking, planning, problem solving. These are all things that are addressed, of course, within our zones of regulation curriculum. So that's things that our teachers are teaching here at school within the curriculum, but also really, really beneficial for parents to be providing this information or helping kids with these things at home. This would be, for example, looking at having those set routines at home. A morning routine is really helpful for a lot of kids. Okay, you need to, what are your steps? Think about for yourselves at home. What are your steps at home? And for the youngers, maybe even for the olders too, we recommend a strategy that could be helpful is coming up with like some pictures, or for olders, maybe writing down what are your steps in the morning. If you have a kid that, with some presenting with some ADHD difficulties, ADHD difficulties, or just difficulties with that executive functioning, that could be something helpful for them to help them to be more independent at home. Okay, we need to, excuse me, brush our teeth, get dressed, do all the basic things, but what else do they need to do? You need to pack your backpack. What needs to go in your backpack? Fill up your water bottle, get your lunch, all of these things that for us, I think we even forget sometimes, but it can just be so boom, boom, boom. We kind of remember, we get into our systems, but for the kids, sometimes we have to more so explicitly teach that and show them what they need to do. So that could be, again, for these routines or these visuals at home, taking pictures, like I mean, I've literally taken pictures of what they need, the items, and then put it on a piece of paper. And then the student can look and see, okay, yep, I got that. Yep, I got that. And doing for morning routine and then even evening as well. I know it is a big responsibility for kids to charge their Chromebooks every night at home, something that, you know, maybe us as parents did not have to do, but that's a big responsibility. And I know when students come to school and their Chromebooks are dead, teachers like, okay, well, you know, then you got to go work at a separate table, or we have to go charge it, things like that. So that's another good executive functioning skill with that organization and planning, to teach them for that routine at home. Okay, you need to get your homework done, eat your snack, plug in your Chromebook, and, you know, whatever else the routines are at home. So just, again, some more examples of strategies, things that you all can be doing at home to help with these executive functioning skills, in hopes that then in the future they can become more independent in doing these things. Our example here on the right side is another example of the more of that inner speech with the executive functioning, that positive thinking within a student. So over the course of the year, Xavier, our student here, learned that his self-talk wasn't helping and began to replace it with a more nurturing voice. This is hard, but I can take a break. So you see that the change of, from the picture, the first picture, I'm so stupid, to then changing to, this is hard, I can take a break. So that is something that a strategy we use in school, and that can be helpful at home, is growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Again, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. A growth mindset would be, is the more positive, like I'm still learning. So changing our thoughts into being from that fixed is, I'm so stupid, this is never going to change, I can't do this, it'll never happen, to, again, that growing perspective. This is hard, I can take a break. It's very interesting to see something as maybe small as this, of changing a student's thought, because that can then really help impact their regulation and even their confidence within themselves, feeling like they can do this. Yes, this is really hard for me right now, but I can keep working and I can get this done in the future. If you do feel like you have some kids at your students at home are very much this, and they have that negative self-talk, I highly recommend even jumping on Amazon. There are a bunch of awesome posters. I have a couple in my office here, I think Paige does as well, of what are those changing our thoughts and those growth mindset versus fixed mindset. It helps to have those visuals at home of when we're having those thoughts, again, I'm so stupid, changing that to, oh, okay, this is hard, I can take a break. Again, I think a lot of this falls on us as parents and caregivers, to check ourselves as well when we're having these, when we're going through these moments. So even as we're, you know, I don't know, you forget something at the grocery store, not saying like, that was so dumb, I forgot to do that. Oh, you know, changing our thoughts too, in that modeling of, oh no, I forgot, there's just a lot going on. That's okay, I could get it next time. I'll get it tomorrow, whatever it may be. So definitely, we thought this would be all about the kids today, but I think it's really even, I hope people come out of this thinking about like checking ourselves too. Myself as a parent too, I'm always watching and thinking about what I'm saying and my regulation, because our little sponges, our little children sponges, are always watching what we're doing. And that's where there can be possibly mirroring sometimes a lot of what they're seeing from us. Which goes on to, I mean, connects nicely to my next piece here, emotional regulation. I mean, we're talking a lot about this today, but another piece to that neurobiological component of regulation as a whole are managing and regulating those emotions. So something that we wanted to talk about here today, specifically with this one, is using language more with our kids about, and I think we just fall into it because it's natural, of we have so I have a toddler at home right now. And so it's really working with him on, you know, he didn't get the right, I'm sure for folks, you know, when your kids were younger, you may remember this, they didn't get the right cup. You know, he wanted a different sippy cup. I gave him this cup. And so for me and my brain, and I'm like, you got to go. I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. Don't be sad about this. It's fine. It's fine. It's still water. But I think then checking ourselves into the information we learned from Paige earlier of where they're at developmentally, for them, it's a big deal. So instead of our responses, and my response in this example, right, of being, you know, it's fine, it's still the same cup, taking a step back and thinking about, okay, I see, modeling that again, I see you're really mad about the situation. How can we solve this? So it's really creating that safe and healthy way for our kids to experience those emotions, and then helping them to restructure that or to appropriately express those feelings. So in my situation, oh, I see you're really upset that you got the wrong cup. Why don't you try asking mommy for a different cup? Right? So it's providing that language, and then we can go about it that way instead of that more judgmental, it's fine, you're fine, it's not a big deal. I think we do that a lot unintentionally just because life is quick and we're kind of on to the next thing. But even for our older kids as well, talking with them, trying to connect it for families that are here today with older kids, in pure conflict. Oh, well, this person said I was stupid, or, they said that I did this wrong. To us, when we hear some of the conflicts that our kids are going through, I'm like, well, this is really not that big of a deal. But we need to check ourselves again and say, well, it sounds like you were really mad. What else could you have done differently? So again, it's really validating a lot of those emotions, helping them and teaching them how to react better and manage those emotions better in the future. This is really important for kids so that we're not teaching them to also avoid, or we call mask, their feelings. So that's pretending all day, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. If for some families on the call, you may have kids that go through their entire day masking, pretending like they're fine, hiding all their emotions. They come home and they're explosive, or they are the opposite. They are crying. They are so sad. They just unleash. That's where we're seeing that impact too at home, right? Of that masking, of trying to, maybe we're not creating always those safe environments for kids to really feel their emotions and talk to us as staff at school, but then also talk to you all at home about it. And the last piece within that neurobiological component piece of looking at regulation is that social cognition. This one is huge as well. Social cognition, really looking at how do we take in the world around us? How are we as people, but then our kids, how are they interpreting social situations? This is how we may, kind of similar to what I was just talking about with the masking. We are seeing other people around us. How are we interpreting that? And then correcting or adjusting our behaviors or our emotions based on everybody else. You may have a kid with this, that your kids may see this of, oh, well, I didn't want to do that because everybody would look at me, or I did do this and then everybody looked at me and it was a big deal, and now I want to avoid those situations. So that's where their social cognition is coming into place, where they're very much aware of others and considering how that impacts them in that social context or social norms. I see this a lot, obviously, with the older kids, but I definitely think the younger kids, they're starting to learn those things as well. I think it's worthy to note here that this can be especially challenging for our learners or for our students who have some of these diagnoses, that it's very hard for them to quickly or just generally read and interpret those social cues, or just navigating the social world around them. So this may also contribute, noting that this can be contributing to their dysregulation at times. So again, as I talked about in the beginning, sometimes we, even us as adults, but our students can't help that it's out of their control with the dysregulation. So teaching them, how can we help? Let's take some steps back. Oh, you're noticing that you are upset, or you felt like, I don't know, Paige wasn't listening to me. Okay, that's my social cognition piece there. What can I do with that? I think a lot of it is communication is very helpful. Teaching our kids healthy and positive communication is something that's very helpful and is really great to practice at home as well. One other piece I wanted to note with this too is really having those, I kind of just talked about this, but labeling it those restorative conversations when we are having that dysregulation at home, or when you're seeing some of those pieces, like with the social cognition, having those restorative conversations. So you guys as parents and caregivers checking in with your kids, if maybe a big moment happens and they, I don't know, they lost their video game and they throw the remote controller, or they're upset at dinner and they throw the plate in the sink, whatever it may be, making sure that social cognition, modeling that communication again, we are having those restorative conversations. Hey, Paige, I'm gonna use Paige's name again. Hey, Paige, it really hurt my feelings earlier when you were upset and you threw the pen at me because I was trying to help you with your homework. So can we talk through that and how my feelings were hurt and how you were feeling? And then what can we do differently next time? So again, it's a lot of that modeling conversation with your kids is a really big number one strategy, something that we really want to drive home for today. But just another example for you all. One last example with the social cognition, thinking about at school. So I'm just going to read it from the thing here. Say a student enters a crowded lunchroom, hoping to catch up with their friends. However, they're walking with their tray and the tray tips and food spills on them and spills all over the cafeteria, causing them distress and embarrassment. Using their social cognition, so this is a kid that's able to use it positively and they have a strong level, if you will, of their social cognition. Using their social cognition and the executive functioning, emotional regulation, all of these different pieces, that student who just spilled their lunch everywhere is able to remind themselves, oh, okay, it's okay. I just need to clean this up. Once I clean this up, then I can go sit with my friends. And so that calm and regulation overrides the urge to run out of the room because they are so embarrassed of food being everywhere. I'm sure kids are looking. So here, that's kind of an example, a live example of how that can be. All of these pieces can come together within our students to help with their regulation. So you saw that executive functioning with the planning, right? They're able to assess, look at what happened. This fell on the floor. Instead of running out or waiting for somebody else, an adult to come pick it up for me, I have that skill of the executive functioning. I know I can clean this up on my own. I know where to get the napkins. The emotional regulation is maybe taking that deep breath or it's okay. I'm just going to clean it up. And then the social cognition piece is really that embarrassment, right, of when that initially happens. So you can kind of see all of the pieces coming in together there with that example. Now it is finally time to talk about the zones. I hope you all have felt like you've gotten some strategies so far, but now we're going to get into the good information too of what we are all here for today. So I'm going to pass it over to Paige.
All right. Before I touch on this, I just wanted to note, especially with that last example you gave, which is a great example, Nicole, I think with the younger kiddos, we have to understand that they're probably going to need that adult to model what they can do or give them ideas. It's very hard to pull that information, especially because, you know, when we talked about development, right, they're really at that basic forms of development. And so when it comes to those bigger emotions like embarrassment, they're fight or flight, they might just run out and they, if you ask them like what could you do, they're probably going to freeze because right now they're still trying to figure out what to do in those situations and even what that emotion is. So don't be afraid to give them ideas and model what they could do, because at that age they're still learning to internalize those things and even identify those bigger emotions. So just wanted to note that for those younger kiddos. As far as getting into the zones of regulation, this is the big topic of the presentation. It is, as you can see, 4 colors of different emotions, and we'll kind of get into that. But it's really a research-based framework, and it was created by a woman named Leah. She is an OT and an educator, and one of the coolest things I think she found is not only to categorize emotions, but the energy levels that come with emotions. So we're going to kind of get into that and we're going to go through each of the zones. So don't worry if you're like, I'm looking at these and I don't understand each. We're going to go through each one. So really thinking about the zones regulation, it's just giving us an easy way to think, communicate how we feel. And it's sorting these emotions not only by their emotions into colors, but into energy levels. So all of the emotions that exhibit low energy might be in blue. And that'll be the first one we talk about. So it's right on my mind. But if we are feeling out of control and angry, that's going to be categorized in red. What I found really cool with working with early childhood and kindergarten with the zones is that the colors give an easy way for them to identify how they feel. When we think of words, especially, you know, some of our kiddos don't have the language to always say the words of emotions, like I'm feeling frustrated. It's easier for them to pull a color. So I'm feeling blue or blue zone rather than I'm feeling sad. And I think that has been really cool to see as I'm seeing some of even our early childhood and kindergarten students just saying their zone they're in. And I think because colors are something we learn at a younger age too, right? You work on colors when these kiddos are like babies, toddlers. And so colors come a little bit easier to pull that from our brain when we're trying to think. So yeah, we'll go into the blue zone first. The blue zone is our lowest level of alertness. And it is basically very low energy, right? You might be sick, tired, hurt, sad. I think the hardest one for littles to understand is bored, mostly because they're still understanding what bored means because you play a lot when you're little. Once you get into like more learning type things, they might like, well, I don't like that activity. And that's kind of when boredom comes in. But when I do teach the zones to the younger grades, especially, we do energy levels of the zones when we say the zones. So when we go to blue, we're all like down on the floor saying blue zone. Because we're learning like what that feels like. It feels really low. And I think that this is an interesting one because it's one of the easier ones for them to identify because often, weirdly, in our brain, we identify blue as sad. So these kiddos, you know, when they're feeling sad, I think blue zones are really one of the easier ones for them to identify. And it does tell us, you know, when do we maybe need one of the most important things, when do we need to go to sleep, right? At night, we get tired. That's telling our body it's time to go to sleep. Sometimes when we're sad, it's telling something that we care about, right? And it's okay to feel sad about anything, but it's helping them understand that it's okay to feel sad. There is no zone that is a bad zone. That's one of the coolest things about the zones regulation. You can be in any zone, even if you're so frustrated, so mad, like that is an okay to zone to be in. It's just, what are we going to do now that we're in that zone? What strategy are we going to use?
So moving on, looking at the green zone, and just a time check, I know we have about 6 minutes left today. We will make sure that we are done on time. So I know we go until 9. So for the green zone, sorry, I just want to make that note for everybody. Looking at the green zone, this is the calm. So if you're thinking about, I kind of think of it in almost like a letter or ladder. So you have the lowest is the blue, what Paige was talking about. Now we're right here in the green zone. This is the calm. The energy is calm. We're kind of more at that regulated state here. Happy, focused, content, peaceful, all words that we use when connecting or talking to kids and connecting that green zone with them. The green zone happens to be the best zone for most cases for it to be in when we're learning. So we do talk a lot about getting back to the green zone here at school. I think it's great for doing at home too. Getting back to green is some language that we use quite often when we're talking about strategies and what to do. So that is what the green zone is there. Green zone examples, I would say at home, you are eating dinner or you're having a conversation, you're working on homework. These are all examples of when we would expect or when we would want our kids to be in the green zone. The next level, now we have a green zone, looking at a little bit higher level of energy would be that yellow zone. Frustrated, worried, focused, or relaxed, proud. Those little bit of next level emotion or energy level there. We see a lot of, at least, well, no, I think both grades are both Paige and I seeing a lot of in that yellow zone is that starting to escalate, that frustration, the stress, excitement. Those are a lot of the emotions or feelings that we see within this yellow zone, and working with kids on, again, identifying within their bodies, using that interoception, of, okay, my body, it's hard for me to sit still. My body is telling me that I'm in the yellow zone. I need to do something now. I need to use a strategy. I need to take a deep breath. I need to go for a walk, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, whatever it may be. I think a big piece with this too is teaching kids that, again, like Paige said, every zone is okay. And then even teaching environments for some kids. If your kids are having a hard time at home of knowing how they should behave in certain environments, when you teach the zones, you can connect it with certain environments. So for example, it's a birthday party and you're going to the trampoline park on Saturday. What zone should you be in? Oh, yes, yellow zone, right? We want to be excited. That's good. That's totally appropriate. But maybe say when we are sitting in, whatever you practice, but if you're sitting in church on Sunday or whatever day of the week that you may practice your faith, that is maybe not a time that you want to be in the yellow zone. That would probably more blue green zone behaviors of staying calm or, doing things like that. So again, that's kind of teaching kids with what environments even could be helpful when thinking about these energy levels. The last one is looking at the red zone. So this would be that extremely high energy, overwhelming emotions. This is the most difficult for all humans, not just our kids, of how to regulate ourselves. This is when it's really important that we learn these skills and that we have people kind of checking in on us or helping us. You see that fight, flight, or freeze, that intense anger. This is when we see maybe possibly a lot of those impulsive reactions. Again, even for us as adults. So that's where it's really important for us as adults to even regulate ourselves before we start helping our kids. Language, again, I'm really in the red zone right now because you are so upset. I need to take a moment and take a deep breath before I come to help you. Whatever it may be, that's an example again of how we can help model a lot of these zones or using these zones in your guys' lives at home to then help your kids with that regulation.
Yeah, and really, when we think about the zone, it's just about how we're feeling on the inside and what our energy level looks like. It's not really always about what our outward behavior looks like, and understanding what that energy feels like in our body. We can go on to the next slide. I know we're on time, but the benefits of the using zone, really that emotional language, building that for kiddos, having a visual and verbal way to create and share those feelings. It opens up that communication, supports co-regulation. I mean, there's a lot of benefits. I think that the zones is just non-judgmental to any emotions, and that's very helpful for kids. They feel validated. We really do all experience blue, green, yellow, and red across a day. It's important, though, that we let kids know green zone is not the only zone they need to be in. They all have a purpose. Again, when we think of blue zone, sometimes the purpose is to tell us when to go to bed at night when we're tired. So it's understandable that they want to be in green zone because that's the regulated state, but it's not the only zone that's acceptable to be in. We want them to experience all the zones. That's human nature.
So checking in with the zones, I'm actually for anybody that was hoping to get more actual tangible things today, I mean, we've talked about things that you can do, but for folks that were hoping to have actual pieces and things to print out and use for today, at the end of the PowerPoint, we will have a QR code that you can access this folder here that we have, and Paige and I have uploaded a few things, and then as we go when we're finding things, we're happy to continue uploading things here. But some of the slides that I was going to review kind of talk about this anyway, using then modeling that language with some visuals. I feel blank because blank, I'm in the blank zone. So these are some more examples again of how you can use some of these visuals if you were hoping to get some things like this, more tangible things out of today. We have that here, and I will advance to the next slide in just a moment. Another one, we talked about all of the zones today, some kind of examples, and really pairing it here. I hope you can see me moving my cursor, but here at the bottom, I can. Always including those conversations about what can you do when you are in this zone. That will help trigger a lot of that strategy conversation with the kids. So a lot of this we honestly did touch about again that I notice I feel I can, similar to what we were talking about. I think overall, we're really just wanting to ensure, and then Paige, I can pass it to you too if you wanted to add to this, but creating that safe space at home. Go ahead.
Could you go to the slide with the picture of the co-regulation?
I know you love this one. Yes.
I do. It's my favorite visual. So it's really important, right? When their storm meets our calm, co-regulation occurs. So if we're already feeling upset as adults, right? And our child's feeling upset, it's important to also take a moment to regulate ourselves. Don't be afraid to step away and take a moment to take a deep breath yourself, because if we go into it with a storm too, we kind of just go into multiple storms. So co-regulation really can only occur when we are regulated for their storm to come to us. So it's very important that we also take care of ourselves and have self-care and regulate ourselves and really master some coping skills for ourselves as adults. And it's hard, even as adults.
So I am going to go ahead and advance to this one. So there are two QR codes. I believe the one on the left page, correct, is the one that connects a person straight to that that folder. The one on the right is more to the Zones of Regulation website. If you would like to, you are welcome to put your I was going to say put your email in the chat, but maybe just for confidentiality reasons, why don't folks, if you're interested in getting the PowerPoint for today, you are welcome to send us an email or Mrs. Lewis, and she can forward them on to us as well. And we can send out, we're happy to send out the PowerPoint for today. Again, a lot of this was recorded so folks can go back and review. And yeah, if anybody has any additional questions, I mean, we're happy to stay on for a few extra minutes, and then we will cut that from the recording part of the presentation. But note that, I mean, school does start soon, so we'll have to take off shortly. But thank you,
I'm gonna
everyone.
stop the recording.
Oh, good. You can do that. Lovely.